believe this is, okay.
Well, thank you all for being here and for making time for what we know it's an especially consequential week on the Hill. The passage of the Dominance Act in the House just this week is a really tremendous bipartisan achievement, especially in today's climate. And so by way of introduction, I'll start first with the senator from the first state, Chris Coons of Delaware, a Democrat. Senator Coons has spent years building the Senate architecture for minerals security legislation. Representative Young Kim, Republican, California, chairs the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific and is the lead sponsor of the Dominance Act. And Representative Bera, Democrat, also of California, is her ranking member and co-lead on that same legislation. And together, they really represent the kind of bipartisan, bicameral collaboration that this challenge demands. So this forum sits at the intersection of two questions that we keep coming back to. The first is strategic. What does it mean for the U.S. to lead in this moment? And the second is institutional. Do we have the architecture to get it done? And so, Senator Coons, I'd like to start with you. Can you zoom out a bit for us and help us frame the current environment? We know that China agreed to suspend its critical mineral exports after the summit last October, only for a year. That clock is running out. What is your assessment of whether the U.S. is moving fast enough to reduce that vulnerability? And what do we need to get moving on to get it right?
Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Fred. Thank you, Atlantic Council, and to everybody who's here, and particularly my friend and former colleague, Senator Landrieu, who's with us. We cannot move fast enough, but we can move faster, and we are. The fourth member of this panel who's not here, but who I'll just recognize, is Senator Pete Ricketts. We have a Republican and Democrat in the Senate, a Republican and Democrat in the House, and that's what's going to make the Dominance Act move. More broadly, critical vulnerabilities in the global economy are really the news of the last few years, whether it's the Strait of Hormuz for the hydrocarbon industry and helium supplies, or it's the fact that China overwhelmingly dominates the processing of critical minerals and rare earths. Many of the rare earths are not actually that rare. It's just that they are used in very small amounts in very high value applications that are critical to defense and to energy, and there's very limited processing capability. So the work that began under the last administration has been accelerated by this administration is critically important. Part of what we are trying to do is to build structures that transcend any particular administration and that make sure that it's clear to the private sector, our partners, our allies, that we have an energy trajectory that is not going to change with each election. So part of what I'll talk about today or this morning is exactly how the energy pact part of this that Senator Ricketts and I are leading in the Senate will be one of the core pillars of the Dominance Act.
That's great, and we're going to come right back to that. But Rep. Kim, I want to start with you. Tell me, how did you come to this? What is the Dominance Act intended to address? The senator laid out the stakes for us. What are the main hallmarks of this legislation? And why did you feel it important to frame this not just in terms of U.S. leadership, but really in terms of direct competition with China?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us here and having this very, very important conversation. Last year, we saw when China put export restriction on our ability to get our access to the critical minerals, we saw the vulnerability. And we saw the President Trump coming out with the executive order saying how important it is for us to retake our ability to compete against our adversaries, namely China at the time, because they retaliated to what we were trying to do. So I think having a lot of roundtable conversations with the industry leaders, both in mining industry to individuals who are trying to look at opportunities to invest in the mining and processing, and also finding out that there is opportunities, but we are not doing it. As Senator mentioned, we are not doing it enough. And we saw also the Russia invasion in Ukraine that put a lot of, Russia is weaponizing Europe's dependence on oil after that invasion of Ukraine. And then we saw China having the critical minerals dominance. And then you mentioned Iran also. It is threatening the Strait of Hormuz, where the 20% of the gas trade is passing through that. So we saw the need to work on a opportunity to provide the long, durable certainty to not only increase the domestic production, to scale up the demands that we need, but at the same time, how do we provide the certainty and give our allies and partners so that they can look at United States as a partner of choice? Look, China, yes, has a lot of dominance in mining and processing, and they are everywhere in the world. But having the larger presence doesn't mean they are the partner of choice. Our partners, allies who are looking to work with us are looking for durability, looking for opportunities, and that's what this Dominance Act is doing, which is why I'm so excited. There is that the Bureau of Energy Security and Diplomacy. A lot of people think, why is it so new? But it is not, right? I mean, this is the first time actually we're congressionally authorizing a bureau that never existed before. Yes, some will argue, well, it was there before, but we had Energy Bureau with the Assistant Secretary. The position was appointed by President Trump in 2018, but it was not codified. So what we're trying to do in the Dominance Act is to recognize that our allies need one command center with one strategy, so we can all work together. And this is creating that Senate-confirmed position, which will be like the assistant secretary level official that will coordinate all of the activities across many different multiple agencies and provide that opportunity for our allies to come to us and say, let's work together. We have all of these tools that we have, but you have not, been able to work with us. We're giving that long-term, clear, durable, opportunity for them. So this will last from one administration to another. So this is not something like we saw previously. It's a great idea, great initiative that it goes away when the current administration is out of the office. This Dominance Act will provide that long-term stability that people are asking, and this is how we dominate our energy and critical mineral supply chain as well.
So it's really the architecture that will root a continuous strategy. So, Rep. Bera, I want to come to you. What is the kind of core logic of this allied approach? How do you respond to critics, as you've been working together with Rep. Kim on this legislation, who argue that building supply chains through partner countries simply trades dependence on China for dependence on other nations who we may not be able to rely on? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so a lot of those partner countries have, you think about Japan going back a decade.
So you're doing other things besides working for the investment?
A few things.
Which firm are you working for?
TWG.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, back to...
Not exactly the voice of God.
Exactly. Now it's like, okay, well, am I hearing things, or is it just me? Japan experienced the economic coercion, but the real wake-up call was the pandemic, right? That was not economic coercion, but it was a massive supply chain disruption. And then the recovery was slow because all of a sudden we realized our total dependence on a single nation, in this case, China. And the vulnerability, Chairwoman Kim just talked about how China not directly, but indirectly choked off some of our supply chains here. So it does need to be an all of the above allied approach with like-valued allies. The Biden administration started the Mineral Security Partnership, which really was foundational. The Trump administration's moved that into Forge. It is the right approach because you're talking about billions of dollars of investment to build this infrastructure, to build the processing and refining capacity. And as Senator Coons talked about, it's not that these are rare elements. They're there. We've got plenty in the United States. It's the refining capacity that is a real challenge. And we should do that with our partners. South Korea right now is chairing chairing Forge. And how do you do that? And Senator will talk about what they've been working on in the Senate in terms of the compact model, because it really is a different way of doing aid development and building this infrastructure, going into the countries in Africa, where you create that context that allows our companies to go in and feel comfortable making massive investments along with the Japanese, with the Koreans, with the Australians. So I think it's the right thing to do, to work together, because we also do have a competitor and adversary that really does intentionally undercut the market. There's a reason why a lot of the U.S. companies have come out of the mining and refining capacity, because Beijing subsidizes this industry. And if I'm running a U.S. multinational company, I can get those, the elements I need very cheaply from China. So we've got to do this together, because we may not be able to compete on price, but we've got to compete on national security.
And so to that point, Senator Coons, we know the U.S. has no shortage of partnerships, dialogues, strategic frameworks. There are many. But your work on the Energy Security Pact suggests that we're missing something that is durable. So what makes it different? What does it look like?
Statutory, long-term, mutual interest. I'll build on what Congressman Bera and Congresswoman Kim were just saying. It's important to realize that some of the world leaders in mining and refining are countries that have long been our closest allies: Canada, Australia, Norway. They have abundant reserves of most of the critical minerals. And then there's other countries that are either treaty allies, like the Philippines, or long-standing partners: Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, that have abundant critical minerals, but where their relations between the United States and China have shifted back and forth over time. Clearly, because of the tariff war that Trump launched on a number of our closest allies, like Canada, we've had strained relations. This was built on the model of the Millennium Challenge Compact, or the Millennium Challenge Corporation, that President Bush launched and has been sustained ever since, is still operating, is still a critical tool. It says we're going to enter into a long-term compact so that it crosses administrations. We're going to provide technical assistance. We're going to develop the goals of this compact in consultation with the country. So it's not just for our benefit and our values, it's for mutual benefit. If you look at the Philippines, for example, where Senator Ricketts and I went as we were developing this concept, they've gone back and forth between having very closely aligned U.S. administrations and less so, and so have we. And as we are trying to develop the whole corridor around Manila, having a long-term framework for our shared development, as the Congresswoman mentioned, will also help bring in other investors who are aligned with us. So if we want the Koreans and the Japanese and the Australians working with us on an investment partnership alongside a country that has resources that can be developed, whether it's Papua New Guinea or it's a more developed country like the Philippines, we need to do this in concert so it's got stability and predictability.
Because this stuff takes a long time.
Takes a long time.
And a lot of capital.
Mining and processing investments are high cost, high risk, long term. And so if we've had critical energy projects where the Biden administration canceled Keystone Pipeline, the Trump administration cancels all the offshore wind, domestically, part of the energy behind permitting is because folks say long-term critical energy projects have to be permitted once they're permitted, not changeable based on the next election, because no one builds anything of that scale on a 3 to 4 year time horizon.
Right.
Much more so in large mining and processing projects.
Totally.
You have to know that you've got sustainable engagement and support from the United States.
Well, and so it really sounds like there's this processing choke point.
Yes.
That we've really got to get right. And given Chinese dominance on this, how do each of you think about what the U.S. can do to build not just the domestic processing capability, but also the extraction? What does it look like for this? We're here 10 years from now. What is the best outcome in the U.S.? What does that look like, and how do we get there?
What's really interesting, so Chairwoman Kim and I had the opportunity to travel down to Peru to visit the Freeport mine down there, and really advanced mining, copper mining, but also then other elements. And we asked where they were refining all this. Well, they're sending it to China to refine. So we're starting to do some of this. Korea Zinc in Tennessee is starting to build a refining plant. The other piece of this is recycling as well, that, we've got a lot of those elements in the batteries and our handheld devices, our iPads. So I think those are things, but as Senator Coons said, it is going to take time and capacity. And then, we might not do the refining here, but we might strategically sit there and say, okay, we want closer ties with Malaysia or someplace else. Can we, with our partners, Japan, Korea, Australia, build refining capacity in other places where it might be easier, build their economies, create that, again, using a PAC model, where our companies are going to want to make big investments and they feel secure in that.
And that's, I just want to echo that too, because what we need to do is provide our partners the assurance and the clarity that they can utilize all of our diplomatic and financing tools that we have, and that's why Energy PAC is critically important. And I think that is why we're so excited about this Dominance Act, because it incorporates all of the things that we heard as we heard from the industry folks. For example, when we were meeting with when we went to Peru, by the way, it was the Fremont McMoran that they told us. They also told us there is a lot of opportunities there, but they go to other countries because in America, the permitting is just ridiculously long. Right now, the average of permitting is about 29 years, right? Even if we cut it in half, it takes still about 12 to 15 years, which is the reason why we have lost all of those opportunities to mine and process overseas. But now, if we can do that in domestic level, obviously, we're going to bring back those opportunities to mine and process and do the manufacturing here. But it takes time. Until then, what do? We need to work with our trusted partners. And by working on this legislation and giving that the long-term durability and the certainty, the United States is really serious about bringing the energy security, the critical mineral supply chain back here, then that's what they were. So we're listening and we are responding to what we heard from our partners, and that's why we're doing this, giving them the long-term durability, certainty that they ask us to do. And we're responding to the administration's mandate that they're putting energy security as a national security.
Well, it really seems directly aligned with so many of the administration priorities that we've seen. Did the White House call to congratulate you on Tuesday? What are you hearing about what happens next?
We've been so busy with other, our committee had a very long markup on this, but we've been working very closely with the administration, and I have to really commend the work of the Bera and working closely with Jacob Halberg, David Copley, and others who really understand this is what we need to be doing at this time. The time is now, critically important. So we are very optimistic that since we've done our part on our side, now the Senate with Senator Coons and Senator Rickett and others who really pay attention. I mean, that Energy PAC is one of our key provision of the Dominance Act. And they have a standalone legislation that is moving through. I believe you already are doing that.
It's scheduled for a markup next week.
Excellent.
That I literally was told that backstage, that it's just gotten on the agenda for next week.
That's great. I want to, if we can, turn Senator Coons to rare earths and the defense industrial base, which obviously is a huge part of this. So the Pentagon has set a 2027 deadline for building a domestic rare earth magnet supply chain for defense applications. Can we get there?
That's a challenging target, but a worthy one, because high-performing magnets that can tolerate huge challenges in terms of temperature and operating environment can resist demagnification. All those properties are critical in lots of different applications. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I'm the senior Democrat on defense and intelligence appropriations, and we just had the annual budget hearing for the Space Force and the Air Force yesterday. And the amount of investment in research and development, in fielding new platforms and systems, and the centrality of coordinated communications and operations in space to our future security demands that we hit this target, whether it's 27 or 28 or 29. but elevating it as a core target is important. We've got some real material science advances happening in the United States. And bluntly, it's one of the reasons why underinvesting or disinvesting in U.S. science research at the university level and the national labs is not in our strategic interest. In the competition for this century, looking at energy and energy production and bringing energy onto the grid, talent, chip design, and materials science are the core pillars of our national security and defense. And there's some policy choices that are costing us in talent. There's things we can and should do in energy and in accelerating access to energy at scale. But we also need to invest in research and getting this durable magnet supply chain aligned into the United States and through core and trusted partners and allies is a key strategic goal.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. There's so much to do. We've really got to get to work. We've got to bring those prices down, get the permitting times changed. We've got to bring some processing back. We're going to let you get back to it. I think you've got a lot ahead of you. Please join me in thanking them for joining us here today.
Thank you, Jen.